Welcome to the StatMan and Robin podcast. We are the dynamic duo of Baltimore sports history. And I'm Jim Johnson, the Statman, with my partner, Robin Haynes. Robin, how you doing?
Doing great, stat man. Uh, I've known you, most of our almost our entire lives as Jim, but I got to throw stat man in there once in a while
You
because
have to.
it's a newly created nickname just for this podcast, so got to make use of it, and it fits.
Maybe I've evolved to a higher level of being.
Ooh, okay,
I'll
okay.
wear that one by the wife and see what she thinks.
I don't want to think too much about that, but yeah.
Yeah, please continue
Okay.
on this
Well,
level.
I want to start off with a summary of one of the most memorable regular season series in Orioles history. It was the final series in 1982 against the Milwaukee Brewers.
Mm.
Um, so again, remember in 82 we have two divisions in each league, and also some folks might not know that the Brewers were in the American League really not that long ago.
Yeah, that's right. People can be so used to them being in the National League. Yeah, they came in the American League. Yeah.
Right, right. The Milwaukee Brewers, who used to be the Seattle Pilots for 1 year in 1969.
Things were
That's
great.
another story.
Yes.
But yeah, the final, for Baltimore Orioles sports fans, the final series in '82 is the definition of the word bittersweet.
Ooh.
So the lead up to that, the Orioles got off to a really crappy start that year. In April, they were 2-10 at one point in April and lost 9 games in a row at one point in April.
Yeah.
So they were kind of climbing out of a hole, more or less the whole season. But as things were uh, coming down to the wire in September, the lead up to the Brewers' closest competition, was the Orioles. Um, and there was actually before this final series in Baltimore, about 10 days before that, 7 to 10 days, there was a 3 game series in Milwaukee. Um, the Orioles were actually 3 games out going into that series. And the Orioles lost game one of that series. So they're 4 games out. So the Orioles were in a position where they pretty much had to win the next 2 games, and they did. They won games 2 and 3 in Milwaukee. Now, if you're an Oriole fan from back in the day, and if somebody mentions the name Bob Scooby to you, it might ring a bell, but you might not remember why. And the only
No,
reason
I don't remember.
okay,
Remind
the
me.
only reason I remember this guy is game three in Milwaukee. The Orioles were clinging to a 3-2 lead in the bottom of the eighth.
I got it. Yeah.
And this guy, Bob Scooby, who did not stick around with the Brewers very long. Anyway, it's 3-2, one out, and Scooby is on third. There's a fly ball to center field, and Orioles center fielder John T-Bone Shelby. Remember
Oh,
him?
yeah. Yes, I
Uh,
do.
so he caught the fly ball and threw a strike to home plate to uh, gun down Scooby at the plate, and the game. The Orioles still had the 3-2 lead going into the ninth. The Orioles did end up winning 5-2. But everybody who saw that game, because that game was broadcast locally on a Sunday around here. So anyway, that's the big,
Well,
definitely Bob Scooby's claim to fame in baseball history.
I remember
He did,
squealing at that throw when he got him
yes,
because that
yes.
was a throw.
It was a
Man,
thing of beauty. Yep, yep. Um,
too bad Shelby couldn't hit, but he could play center field.
yeah, yeah. Shelby had his moments as a hitter.
Moments.
Had some power. But then so basically after that, the Orioles were scheduled to go to Detroit for a 3 game series. Milwaukee went to Boston for a 3 game series. Uh, the Orioles proceeded to lose the first 2 games in Detroit. Milwaukee won their first two in Boston. So basically, the third game of each of those series was on a Thursday. the Orioles did manage to beat the Tigers, and the Brewers lost the third game in Boston on Thursday, which set up the series, the final 4 game series in Baltimore, with the Orioles 3 games out with 4 to play. So you got to win them all.
Yep.
Um,
Sweet.
and you and I were there for the twilight doubleheader on Friday, October 1st, again against the Brewers. Going into that game, the Brewers had a guy named Pete Vukovich starting game 1. And remember, the Brewers only have to win 1 game and it's over. Right. And Pete Vukovich, let's look at him up a little bit. I don't remember him being that great of a starting pitcher, but he was the best the Brewers had at that time, and he did win the Cy Young Award that year.
I thought he did, yeah.
But one of the most amazing things that I saw when I looked at his stats for that year, he won the Cy Young with a whip of 1.5.
Wow.
I really had to do a double take at that.
Wow.
But anyway,
he walked a lot of guys, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he had trouble with putting guys on base. But
wow.
But you know, if you're a Brewers fan and you're going into the first game of that series and Vukovich is the starter, you're like, okay, let's just win one, over with, put the Orioles out of their misery. But in game 1, the Orioles won 8-3. They had 15 hits and only 1 home run in that game by Ken Singleton. So they're still alive. And another interesting thing, the Orioles struck out as a team 1 time in that first game.
Oh, don't you long for those days?
Yeah. Hard to believe, isn't it?
It really is.
But a convincing 8-3 win. Game 2. Another thing about that, and you and I were there, I don't really remember this that much, but so it's the twilight doubleheader. It really did not start until close to 5:40, 5:45. Yeah. And that first game went 3 hours. And so the second game started at 9:19 p.m. I looked it up to the minute.
Apparently, yes.
And I don't think either one of us had to work the next day. I had to work some weekends back then, but I think that's the only way we got through it.
Yeah.
Game 2. The Orioles won again, 7-1 with 13 hits. So 28 hits total for the Orioles in the doubleheader. That game, the Orioles brought out the long ball, and it's really about the only time in the whole series that they did it. Eddie Murray had a 2-run homer in the first inning. That set the tone. And then also Len Secada, T-Bone Shelby, who I mentioned, and Cal Ripken, who was in his first full season on his way to the Rookie of the Year award. He also homered in that game. Storm Davis, lots of Orioles fans remember him. Complete game in that. Only gave up 6 hits and 1 run. So the Orioles sweep the twilight doubleheader. Another thing I remember, I believe in the second game, because the Orioles were just pounding whoever the Brewers had on the mound.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Yeah.
It didn't matter. And, you know, at one point, Milwaukee went to the bullpen for I don't know how many times they had done that by the second game. But I just remember us and the fans around us, and probably a lot of fans, were just kind of waving the next guy to come in on the mound. Like, come on in, buddy.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
We're tearing everybody up. If we did it the first game, we're doing it in the second game. So come on, because we know that you don't have anything either. I don't think the Brewers bullpen was much to speak of overall. And it certainly wasn't in this series, because I'm going to get to that even more after this doubleheader in games 3 and 4. The Orioles kept pounding. Game 3.
Well, before you jump to that,
sorry.
Just a couple quick notes on that. First off, I don't remember being in a more wired Orioles crowd than that night.
Yes.
That was incredible. And that was just so much fun, because there wasn't, there was a lot of tension about the games, but when you're knocking the ball around the park, it really relieves the tension, doesn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And another thing that the crowd built on Friday was everybody was on their edge of their seats on Thursday evening. The
Yeah.
Orioles had to win in
Oh,
Detroit,
yes.
and Milwaukee, uh, you know, did us a favor by losing against the Red Sox. So
Yeah.
um,
Well,
we
and
knew we had a shot.
I wound up with a ticket. Usually you were the ticket guy in for the Orioles, but I worked at a place, a large company that had an employees club, and they had invested in 4 season tickets for the Orioles. So you went in March and you put in your money for the 4 tickets and you drew a date. And I drew that date. I sat on those tickets for over 6 months
Wow.
waiting,
I
and I was bummed out
I
because
had
I'm like,
totally
oh,
forgotten about that.
no, I'll never forget that because I'm like,
Well,
man, I got to wait 6 months to use it because they were really good seats. You know,
yes, they
uh,
were.
the third baseline about halfway
Yeah.
up, they were sweet.
Yep. Lower
And
level.
yeah, well, I wonder what we could have scalped them for, but we never even talked about it, did we?
Oh, no
There was
way. No way.
no
But
thought of that.
I'm also fairly certain that was not originally scheduled as a doubleheader. I think there was a
No.
makeup of a rainout from earlier in the season.
Well, and here's what happened. See if you remember this. There was a game in the first series. It wound up as a tie, and then got stopped by rain.
Ah, that's right. If you look, that's right. If you look at the records of both teams, they
Right,
both had a tie.
right,
And
and it
and the tie
happened.
would have had to have been against each other for them to
Right,
potentially end up tied.
and it only happened because the Brewers catcher in that game, Ted Simmons, lost track of how many outs, and he kind of rolled the ball back to the mound, and the tying run scored from third base.
You know what? Now that you mention that, I remember that
Yeah.
happening. I wouldn't have been able to pin it down to 82 in the Brewers. I remember
Yeah.
that happening in an Oriole game years
So
ago.
that wound up forcing the tie, which then forced that game to get added to that night. So I mean,
So that's why it was a doubleheader.
what a sequence of events.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you could remember that because that is an incredible thing to
Yes.
incredible circumstance that brought this doubleheader and made it a reality, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think that's game was would have been back in June,
okay,
probably.
so it was months before. Wow.
Yeah. So there you go. Please
Okay.
continue.
So anyway, the Orioles sweep the doubleheader, and I do remember reading some accounts from the Brewers clubhouse at that point. They were not feeling too good because they knew they had to face that home crowd the next day, Saturday.
Yeah.
Uh, didn't, in fact, it went even worse for the Brewers in Game 3 on Saturday afternoon. The Orioles won 11-3. The Orioles had 18 hits in that game, no home runs, 11 runs.
Mm.
Um, so up to that point, the Orioles had scored 26 runs in the first 3 games, 46 hits.
Wow.
um, an interesting thing that happened in that game in terms of the pitching for the Orioles. So
Yeah.
Scott McGregor started, and the Orioles got off to a lead, 3-0, 3-1. And in the fourth inning, Scott McGregor was taken out of the game after giving up the tying run by Earl Weaver. And let's not forget, Earl Weaver, I think prior to the season starting, had let it known that this was his final season.
Yep.
So this is Earl Weaver's final regular season series. Um, so anyway, Earl Weaver decided to take out Scott McGregor. The score is 3-3. He brings in Sammy Stewart, who was just very
Lights.
rated as a guy in the bullpen. I mean, he could do anything. He could
Yep.
pitch long relief. He could start, which he did quite a few times. Sammy Stewart proceeded through the rest of that game, 5 2/3 innings, gave up 2 hits, no runs. Another interesting thing about Sammy, the previous year, 1981, he led the American League in ERA.
Oh, that's right. He pitched enough innings to qualify.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he got just enough innings. Again, he was a guy you could use in any situation. Now, some people looking ahead to or looking back on Game Four, which we're going to get ready to talk about,
Mm,
uh, some people looking back on that feel like maybe Earl Weaver panicked a little bit by bringing in Sammy Stewart at that point in the game when it was 3-3. And you look at an 11-3 game. Well, if Weaver had known that the Orioles were going to score 8 more
right.
runs, he ain't bringing in Sammy Stewart. And the other thing that Earl Weaver knew that he had in his holster, so to speak, was Jim Palmer pitching the next day. So
There you go.
Earl's mindset: do whatever you have to win this game, so we
Right.
get to Palmer in Game Four for
Right.
all the marbles.
Absolutely.
So
It's sudden death at that point.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
So
McGregor was not pitching well.
right. And benefit of hindsight, the way things turned out in Game Four, you would have loved to have had Sammy Stewart available, but he clearly was one guy that was not available after going 5 2/3.
Right. You just had
Um,
to get to Palmer and have the game win some.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yep.
82 was a big bounce back year for Jim Palmer.
Yes, it was.
Um,
Last hurrah, basically.
it pretty
Yeah.
much was because Jim did pitch in 83. Got certainly not nearly as many innings pitched as he normally did in his career. But by 84, into June of 80, I believe June of 84, he was done.
Yep.
But anyway, the Orioles did win the first 3 games. Now we go to Game Four on Sunday afternoon. Again, it's a tie. Win the game, you win the division. Um, so again, we have Jim Palmer versus Don Sutton for the Brewers. Really great matchup, but I think all Oriole fans going into that game had an incredible amount of confidence. We had
Oh, yeah.
all the momentum, and we have Palmer. How can it go wrong? Well, unfortunately, it did. Um, Game Four, the Orioles lost ultimately 10-2. Although it was a 5-2 game going into the ninth inning, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So I'm sure if you remember anything about that game, one of the most disheartening things was second batter of the game against Jim Palmer, Robin Yount, who was the MVP that year,
Yep.
hit a home run into the right field stands. Brewers are on top right away. Um, but, there's still hope.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
another guy the Orioles had on that team, which I don't think too many people would remember. They had a guy playing third base named Glenn Gulliver, who
Yep.
played for the Orioles a little bit in 82 and even less in 83. And that was the extent of his major league career. In the bottom of the first, he got on base and there were 2 outs. He's on second, and there was a base hit to right field. And he ran through a stop sign at third base and was such a dead duck by 20 feet, it seems like.
Yeah, I remember that now.
That was the third out in the bottom of the first, but it was such a deflating thing. Some people say that Glenn Gulliver got in Earl Weaver's doghouse at that point, and Weaver was never going to forget it. Now he did try to redeem himself later I believe it was in the third inning. He got the Orioles on the board with his only career home run in the majors. But
Whoa.
him getting thrown out, again, just
That
totally
hurt.
missing a third base coach. There's just no excuse for that.
No.
So as the game progressed, you could see that Palmer just didn't quite have it. He gave up 3 home runs. He gave up another home run to Robin Yount and another, I believe, to Cecil Cooper.
Yeah.
And the Orioles weren't doing much at the plate. It was 5-1 though going into the bottom of the eighth, and the Orioles did scratch out a run, and they ended up having the bases loaded with 2 outs, 5-2 game. And the Orioles brought up their number 2 catcher, a guy named Joe Nolan. And I can still see this play vividly. Uh, Such a heartbreak. Bases loaded, and we had a fast runner on first, the potential tie run. Joe Nolan hits a rocket a left-handed hitter, but he hits it down the left field line. It's not in danger of being foul, but it's kind of heading for that left field corner.
Oh, yeah.
Brewers left fielder Ben Oglivie, not known for his defense, made this incredible sliding catch in the
Yeah.
corner for the third out. If he doesn't catch that, the game is tied because
Yep.
there's two outs, everybody's running. Um, so that was kind of it for the Orioles
I
because,
can see that play now. I hadn't
yes,
thought about that for a long
yes,
time. But yeah, that was a great play.
right. Top of the ninth, the Brewers did end up scoring five more runs, so that game was definitely over then, of course. And then finally, to kind of summarize the whole series again, Earl Weaver, it's his last game for the Orioles. As it turned out, was it really? That was another
Yeah.
chapter a few years later, but at the time, it looked like this was it for Earl Weaver. Howard Cosell was in the booth for that game on TV. This was on national TV. And instead of focusing on the Brewers' celebration, which they certainly had a right to celebrate, um, I have to give Howard Cosell credit because he focused on uh, an exchange that was going on between Brewers manager Harvey Keene. And it was on the field. It was like kind of right outside the Orioles dugout. And Harvey Keene, to his credit, came over to Earl Weaver and was basically kind of consoling and embracing Earl Weaver because he recognized the moment, and so did Howard Cosell. Uh, was pointing out to the national audience what an incredible moment it was for the opposing manager to do that, and just recognizing that this was Weaver's what looked like it would be his last game at the time.
Yep. Keane was a classic.
Again, yes, yes. So very, very hard to get over. Uh, just made the Orioles winning the World Series the following year. It just made it that much sweeter.
The bounce back. Well, and everybody kind of felt like they were let out of jail because the '83 manager Joe Altobelli had a much different style. Let's just put
Yes,
it that way, and
very,
that worked for that year.
it sure did. It sure did. And you know what? There were some players that, you know, after you played for Earl Weaver for a while, you respected him as a manager. It doesn't mean he was the easiest guy to get along with. uh, so there were some veterans that felt like, you know what, I would really love to go all the way without Weaver as the manager here.
Yeah, and they did.
And a final thing I got to point out about that four-game series as far
Yeah.
as the Orioles bats. So I mentioned they had 56 hits through, I'm sorry, 46 hits through three games. They got 10 hits in the final game, game four. That's an average of 14 hits per game. Team batting average for the four-game series, 378.
Whoa.
Now,
Whoa.
how many four-game series have there been in the history of Major League Baseball where the team batting average approached that? I could not find anybody
Wow.
that ever beat that. I did find the highest uh, batting average in World Series history for a team was 310 by the Angels in, I believe, 2002. Now, that was a seven-game series. But anyway, the Orioles hit 378 and just couldn't come up with game four.
Yeah, because they did score a few runs on that Sunday game, but not enough. Yeah. Well, and I'm going to insert this here instead of at the end of the broadcast because as I was getting up to speed on this, I went back to looking at the 1980, and you mentioned that game before where they had to beat the Tigers to ensure that the Milwaukee series meant anything,
Right.
and they wound up scoring 4 runs in the ninth to make up a 5-2 deficit and win 6-5. So it was like a similar situation in the Milwaukee game, except this time it went the other way. And you're not going to know this because I didn't know this. Maybe you will. I don't know. The starting pitcher that night was Mike Flanagan, and he didn't have it. And they pulled him with nobody out in the fifth inning and 2 runners on. and the Orioles already down 3-0, or 3 or 4-0. I'm not sure which. And they brought in somebody that they had called up as a reinforcement from the Rochester farm team. And he pitched 5 innings, 1 run, 3 hits, as they say, kept them in the game.
Yeah.
And it was just enough for them to win. This pitcher won the game. He went to 2-0 and never pitched in the major leagues again after that game. Yeah.
You know, now that you mention it, I do vaguely remember the dramatic comeback on Thursday.
Yeah.
And again, that's just another thing that had the crowd so hyped up for Friday.
Right. They're coming off a great game. Yeah.
Yeah, because it looked like the whole weekend against Milwaukee wasn't going to matter. I could not, for the life of me, remember this pitcher's name.
Nor should you. His name is John Flynn, and his career record was 5 wins and 2 losses.
Okay, and I do vaguely remember that name.
Yeah,
but
all that. I mean, well, he actually had pitched for Milwaukee 2 years prior, and they let him go.
Okay,
and the Orioles had drafted him, and they re-signed him, and he pitched. Let's see, how many games did he pitch? He pitched 5 games that year, all of them in September after the September call-ups.
Wow.
But yeah, they must have been really short on pitching to put him into that situation. And he had his moment. And that was it. He did not make the team in '83. He had a bad year in Rochester. Orioles let him go. Nobody picked him up.
Nobody ever picked him up.
He wound up in Hagerstown in Class A in '85, still trying to make a comeback. Didn't make it. He wound up coaching for a couple of years and finally packed it in because he was already at '82. He was already 28 years old.
Wow.
So, but okay, he did have his moment.
John Flynn, if you're still around, I'm figuring that you are. You have been duly recognized.
That's right. Thank you.
By the StatMan and Robin podcast for what had to be your moment of glory. You know, if the Orioles had gone on to win the World Series, I think John Flynn actually really would have gotten his due.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a footnote to history, but we're all about footnotes.
We promised some useless or semi-useless stuff, and we're coming through.
Let's go with obscure. That sounds so much better. It's basically the same thing.
You're right.
Better spin.
Useless is too strong.
Yeah, we don't want people to be listening to our useless podcast. To our obscure podcast is, I guess, bad enough. I don't know.
Right.
Well, so I want to talk about another series I've always been fascinated about, and I don't remember. I didn't remember a ton of the details because only one of the games was televised. Back in the day, games weren't on TV that much. 1980, going back 2 years, again, the Orioles Magic era. They didn't call it Orioles Magic for nothing. Now, again, This one still had it's kind of a melancholy finish. But I'm talking about the mid-August series when the Yankees came into Baltimore. And that was the year that the Orioles chased them, had another bad start, not quite as bad as '82. We hoped that they had gotten rid of that in '79 when they got off to a mediocre start and then jumped out and led the Eastern Division most of the year and wound up winning the pennant. They never really got buried this year, though, and then they got red hot. And let me pull that up. In August, they went 21-8.
Wow.
And they were 21-9 in September. Unfortunately, the Yankees were just about as good.
Yep.
And the Orioles would win, the Yankees would win. The Orioles would lose, Yankees would lose. And it was, But when it came into mid-August, and the Orioles had swept a series in New York the week before, a 3-game series. And that series drew over 150,000 people at Yankee Stadium. No sellouts, but still pretty good crowds for a midweek series.
Mm-hmm.
And the Orioles had won those games. Let me make sure I got the exact scores here. They had won them 5-2, 4-2, and 6-5. So unlike the Milwaukee series, 2 years later, they did not have the heavy lumber out for that, but they had good pitching. Palmer won the first game, and Steve Stone, that was his magical year.
Boy, was it
25 wins.
Yep, Cy
And,
Young.
yep. And then what? 3 shutout innings in the All-Star game. Everything he touched. If they could have pitched him every day, they would have been great. But,
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, in that 1980 All-Star game, Steve Stone pitched 3 scoreless, and it was 3 up, 3 down every inning.
Yeah, I think you're right. 3 perfect innings. Yes. And then Tim Stoddard won the third game in New York in relief. So they beat, among others, Ron Guidry and Tommy John. Yes, Tommy John of the Tommy John surgery. That is actually an actual person. For you youngins that just know about him as a ligament in an elbow, he was actually a human being and a pretty good pitcher for a long, long time.
Long time.
So the Orioles come back for the rematch in Baltimore. And again, this is impacted by a rainout. It was a 4-game series scheduled Thursday through Monday, and there had been a rainout in April in Baltimore. So they tacked it on for a late afternoon game as a 5 o'clock first pitch. And, on Monday. So a 5-game series. And that series wound up setting records for attendance that, given the steady shrinkage of Camden Yards, are not likely to ever be broken, although I'm sure they'd love to get another 5-game series against the Yankees in there. But anyway, this was really a huge, huge deal. Sports Illustrated covered it. They had it on their cover. And the series was later on referred to by Baltimore Sun columnist Alan Goldstein as the incredible take-no-prisoners 5-day war waged by the Orioles and the Yankees. There was certainly a disappointment because after the final game of that series, which was August the 19th, I believe, bear with me for a second. August the 18th, the Orioles and the Yankees didn't play each other again.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was unfortunate. I mean, that's going to work out with some teams in your division, but so the climax of the season actually was in the middle of August. So the first game was Thursday night, and let's see, we had a crowd of 49,952. The smallest crowd of the series. They were 48 people away from having 5 straight 50,000 crowds.
Wow.
Of course, the capacity at Oriole Park's 42,000 maybe. So
yeah.
They got off to a good start because Steve Stone was pitching, and he may have pitched his best game of the year. He pitched a complete game 2-hitter. The only damage that was done is Reggie Jackson got a home run off of it.
Okay.
And that was in the second inning. The Orioles had already gone out to a 2-0 lead. And then it was 2-1. Stone wasn't the sharpest on his control. He had 5 walks, but he never bunched them together. They never really got him in big trouble. And the Orioles kept chipping away. They got 2 in the first, 2 in the 6th, and 2 in the 7th. And there were 2-run homers by, a 2-run homer by Gary Renicky. Remember him? Part of that great platoon in left field. And then
he had a great year. He had his best year ever that year, if I recall, 1980.
I think you're right. And Rich Dower and Ken Singleton. And I think that might have been Singleton's best year, too, in 1980. He had a really good
79, he had a great year because I know he ended up number 2 in the MVP that year.
You're probably right.
Better in 79.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he hit more homers in 79, too. He had better power.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Rich Dower hit the first of his 2 home runs that year in that game with the score 4-1 starting to pile on insurance runs. And it was a quiet night for the Yankees. The Orioles had come in. They had dropped a game back. They had gone within 2.5 with the sweep in New York. They lost 2 out of 3 in Kansas City. And remember, Kansas City won the American League pennant that year, so that was no
Right.
slouch. And then coming back in, winning that game, they were back within 2.5 and still four cracks at these guys.
Right.
And winning 3 out of 4 would have got them down to a half game. Now, that didn't quite happen. But then Friday night, you had a really probably the toughest loss of the series is the Yankees. Let's see, the matchup was Tommy John against Mike Flanagan, and Flanagan did not have a good start. It was eerily similar to that the pitching situation in that Saturday game of the Milwaukee series you just talked about, Rob, where McGregor got the quick hook. Well, Flanagan only went 4 1/3 and given up 7 hits and 4 runs. And who comes in? Sammy Stewart.
Yep.
4 2/3, no hits.
Wow. Yeah, just
3 Ks.
a real unsung hero for that Orioles team, late 70s, early 80s.
Yes, he was. But this time, unfortunately for the Orioles, they could not take advantage of that. They got 2 runs in the 7th to make it 4-3. But then they had to deal with Goose Gossage. Because John got through the 6th, and then he got in trouble, and his reliever, Bird, I forget his first name, came in, and they had to pull him. And Gossage went 2 1/3. Another example of how baseball was different there, because he was the closer. And that was one of his best years, was 1980, even though he gave up the big home run in the American League Championship Series to George Brett, which I think still hasn't come down.
Right.
But he went 2 1/3 with 5 strikeouts. And in the 8th and 9th, Orioles down a run, he struck out 5 of the 6 hitters.
5 out of 6. Wow.
Yeah, and the only other one got a ground out. So he went through the meat of the order and, dare I say, carved them up. So some very, very good clutch pitching from him. And an off night for Flanagan, who was coming off his Cy Young year. He was going to pass the mantle to Stone after that. But a crowd of 50,434 were mostly disappointed. Now, back then, the Orioles-Yankees was a big freaking deal.
Yep.
That was a nasty rivalry, and that the intensity of that season really put gasoline on the fire. But I don't think a whole lot of Yankee fans were able to make their way into Memorial Stadium that weekend. They had a bad habit of infiltrating for those games, but I don't remember there being a whole lot of presence, because I don't remember there being a whole lot of fights.
That was usually a good indicator. That's true.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because I remember you telling me later on in the 80s, the deal was if you take a date to a Yankees game, don't sit out in the bleachers. That's where most of the fights are.
That usually was the case. Yeah.
You get good enough tickets. The Yankee fans generally don't get those. They're picking up the bleacher seats and
whatever you can get.
Yeah. So you could usually see people converging. Up there we go. This was too serious for that.
Right. Well, not that alcohol could ever be involved in those situations.
No, they don't like to sell beer at games, do they? So that was a huge win for the Yankees, because they did what Milwaukee couldn't do. Is they stemmed the tide after a potentially momentum starting game in that first game of that series. But it also kept the tone that those were 5 hard-fought games. So it was very much different from the Milwaukee series in that respect. And, the no holds barred mentality was kind of there. The picture of Sports Illustrated was, I think it was Al Bunbury taking out the second baseman, for the second baseman or shortstop. He's taking out somebody at second. And that was a really good picture of that. Fortunately, there weren't any fisticuffs during the games, but it was incredibly intense. So now we go to Saturday afternoon. NBC did not put this on their Saturday game of the week. I checked that. They had 2 other games as the alternates. The Orioles and Yankees were not one of them.
Wow.
Anyway, not that we wouldn't have seen it, so not that it really mattered, but I'm just saying. So Saturday night, 51,649 show up, one of the records that was set, the largest night game, single game attendance. And I'll go through those after I finish going through the games here. And the pitching matchup was Dennis Martinez against Gaylord Perry.
I had forgotten that he pitched for the Yankees
So
there.
had
Yeah.
I. They had just picked him up earlier that week for this series.
Really? Just
And
for that series?
Just for that
Wow.
series. And that was back in the day when those waiver trades, remember after the trading deadline?
Yeah.
Yeah, Perry was near the end, and he pitched kind of so-so when he was with the Yankees. He only had a 4-4 record the rest of the year, but that was probably his best game. He pitched 7 innings and only gave up a run on 5 hits. And then Gossage came in the next game after 2 1/3 and went 2 innings and 6 up, 6 down.
Wow.
Yeah, so 4 1/3 innings. He had not allowed a base runner.
Right.
Again, he
And
was
pitching all those innings back to back.
Yeah. The first thing a manager would say today is, well, first of all, he's not going to pitch his closer 2 innings,
Right.
unless it's a World Series.
Right.
Secondly, he's not going to pitch him the next night after 2 innings, and he's certainly not going to pitch him 2 innings the night after 2 1/3 innings.
Sure.
But now Gossage had come up as a starter. So, it wasn't as big a deal to get, what do they call them, lengthened out, stretched out.
Yep.
So the Orioles did not find an answer for him, and the Yankees did have answers for Dennis Martinez, again, another starter going through with 4 runs. Dennis gave up 7 hits and 6 walks. Yes, not good. Oscar Gamble and Eric Soderholm, 2 big names, hit home runs off of him. Gamble's was a 2-run shot, and that was all they needed. Yankees only got 7 hits. Orioles only got 5. So now they're back to 3.5. They're back to 4.5 down.
Right.
And it's like,
yep. You got to win the next 2. Got to.
Yeah. Right. And if the Yankees have won the next 2, they're up 6.5.
Right.
There's still a month and a half left in the season, but Sunday was basically a must win, and it was the Sunday afternoon game. 50,073 showed up for that. ABC TV carried it, but blacked out in the home market. It was on Channel 7 in Washington. I don't remember that, but
wow.
So I don't know if you remember watching that or not. That was the only game that had any television coverage out of those 5, which for the youngins listening to this, I know it's got to be hard to believe. But when they said game of the week, they meant it.
That's absolutely one game. Right.
Yes.
Right.
There was no such thing as cable coverage back then. In fact, most people don't know no such thing as cable.
Right.
As I was looking back at this, they asked Channel 2, who was the local carrier of the Orioles games. They said they had an agreement with the Orioles that they would never carry a Yankees or Red Sox weekend game.
Really?
Yep. So, okay. and they just said they couldn't put it together that quickly, even if they got permission, because maybe they could have carried the Monday game.
Right, I see.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because, the Orioles and the Red Sox and Yankees coming in were not automatic sellouts at that point.
Right.
But they were going to get good crowds, and they don't want to dampen the crowds.
Right.
Of course, they could have put all 5 of those games on TV, and they probably still would have drawn as many as they drew.
Yeah. Yeah, most likely, I think they would have.
But this was the tightest, tensest game, and I think, I've talked about intensity of this series. It was also really just tense, and this was the tensest of them all. Scotty McGregor and Luis Tiant at the back end of his career. The Yankees had picked him up after the Red Sox let him go. And
between Tiant and Gaylord Perry and Tommy John.
and Tommy John.
How,
Yeah,
how many innings between those three guys?
geez, a million. It also showed you they weren't exactly developing starting pitching in the farm system at that point.
Absolutely,
They had
absolutely.
to go out and get Gaylord Perry for the pennant race.
Right.
He was about 75 years old at the time, I think. And John was probably pushing 40 because he started in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Tiant showed some of the old magic. We saw him pitch a lot of great games against the Orioles for the Red Sox. He went 7 2/3 and only gave up a run. And that run was driven in by Terry Crowley, the King of Swing. I love that nickname. He didn't
Yes,
quite live up to that, but he did have some big hits over the years.
he did.
He got the game, what turned into the game-winning hit in the 6th inning because Scotty pitched a 9-inning typical Scott McGregor game. I don't have the pitch count on that. I'll bet you it was under 100. He gave up 6 hits and a walk, and that was it. 1 extra base hit. That was Scott McGregor at his best.
Yeah. If I recall, that was his 120-win season in his career, 1980. Pretty sure about it.
I think you're probably right. Let me just look that up real quickly. 1980. You are correct. He was 20-8.
Yep.
And he finished strong. He was 14-6. That win put him up to 14-6. So, he was money. He was usually a great big game pitcher. Now, he didn't always get runs.
Right.
And the games he lost in the 79 World Series and the 83 World Series, he pitched really well.
He sure did.
But no runs. And no runs here, but he pitched well enough to make 1 run hold up. And I'm surprised the game was 2 hours and 26 minutes. He's known for throwing 2-hour games. So Tiant must have messed around because.
Well, Tiant's windup alone will extend the length of the game.
They'll tack on 5 minutes of the game anyway. Yeah. So the Orioles at that point had a split, and it was 2-2 and back within 3.5 games. And now you had the 5 o'clock Monday afternoon game.
Right.
And Mayor Schaefer had said city employees would be granted time off to go to the game. Yeah. And he encouraged other employers to do the same. And it worked out pretty well because they had, let's see, what was the crowd? 51,528. I don't know how many of them were city employees. I bet you there were a few.
Wow. On a Monday at 5 o'clock.
Yes.
And as any lifelong Marylander will tell you, August, it seems like sometimes half the population is at the beach in like the Ocean City, Maryland area, Delaware beaches, just a couple of hours away. That's August in Baltimore.
Yep, that's right. Well, they rescheduled the beach trips that weekend. I'll tell you what. Now, this game got kind of crazy. The Yankees jumped out to a 2-0 lead off of Palmer. It was Palmer versus Guidry. Now, Palmer was having a good, not great year, and you could say the same for Guidry. And neither one of them had a good game. Palmer gave up 5 runs in 7 innings, and Guidry gave up 3 but 5 walks in 3 2/3. And they put in Rudy May. I didn't realize he was still pitching. And then Tom Davis came in out of the bullpen and pitched 3 innings of shutout. But after the 2-0, the Orioles went to town. And again, with no home runs, got 3 in the 4th and 3 in the 5th. And you had RBIs from Bunbury, Dower, and Mark Belanger.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
He went 2 for 3 in that game. Got 2 big RBIs there. So that put the Orioles out to a 6-2 lead. But then the 8th inning got kind of nervous, and that's when they yanked Palmer. And Tippy had to come in, Tippy Martinez, and get the last 2 outs. And Tim Stoddard, Palmer left with a runner at third and 1 out.
Okay.
And Tippy got the last 2 outs, and then Stoddard gave up 2 singles and runners at first and third, 2 out, tying run at third, 2nd inning in a row, and he got out of it.
Yeah. Stoddard had a big year as a closer that year.
Yep.
Uh, he had, I want to
79
say,
and 80, he had really good years.
yeah, yeah. Stoddard had, I think, between 25 and 30 saves that year. That was his high point, pretty sure, in his career.
Let's see, he got number 18 in that game. Where's the saves category? He had 26.
Okay.
And that was definitely his high mark. 79 wasn't as big a year for him. Yeah, he had 26 saves and a 2.5 ERA. But again,
And who did Tim Stoddard play college basketball for?
the only player in history to
Right.
win an NCAA basketball championship with NC State, and we'll
Yep.
be talking about that team in later
Yeah.
programs. The 74
Unfortunately, we
NC
won't be
State
talking
champion.
about that team. Yes.
Yes. And then won a World Series later in 83 with the Orioles.
Right. Right.
Neither he was the star of neither team, but he was an important contributor to both teams.
He was a
So,
big somebody. I would not want to face him on the mound. I think he was 6'7", 6'8".
he was a serious power forward, and
His nickname was Bigfoot. I don't know if that was a basketball name, but it definitely was his name with the Orioles.
he was a big guy, that's for sure.
That was back in the days of the Bigfoot sightings too. Late
Well, there you
70s.
go. So the Orioles wound up winning 3 out of 5 in that kind of seemed like World Series, because I've seen a lot of World Series that were not as intense or competitive as that 5 game series was. Let's face it.
Right.
And they wound up 2.5 games out of first. Now, they did continue to win after that. They won the last 2 of the Yankee series, and then they tacked on 6 more and got within a half game and stayed within a half game for a couple of days. Then lost a couple at California to fall 2.5 back, got within a game and a half back. But that was as close as they could get. They could never catch them. And they tapered off a little bit. They did not play badly, in September. I think I may have mentioned. Let's see, September. No, I mentioned that for the. Yeah, they were 21-9 in September,
Right.
and they ended August a game and a half out, and they ended September 2.5 out. I mean,
Right.
what are you going to do? The
And
Orioles wound up winning 100 games,
yes,
second
yes,
best record in the major leagues.
in the majors and no postseason play. So modern
Right.
day fans, the way the setup is now, no, wasn't always like that. But like
No.
you said, Orioles win 100, season over.
And to wrap this up, I think we can bring both of those weekends together, because if you look up in the history of Orioles attendance, you see these 2 series littered all over that. The record for a night game, 51,649 for the Saturday night game of that Yankees 1980 series. Night doubleheader, the doubleheader we were at in 82, 51,883. And see, I thought 5-day series. Well, okay. How many of them are there? But
Exactly.
still, 249,605.
Wow.
That is pretty amazing. And that doesn't add up to the official single game attendance, because there was only one crowd under 50. But that's what they have in the media guide. It's 249,605.
Right.
But I added up about 252.
Okay.
I used to be an accountant, so I can add.
You are the stat man. You're proving it once again.
There you go. And a 3-date series was the record, the Brewers series, 150,757. So that averaged a little over 50,000.
Wow.
So that's why part of the reason why we made a big deal out of these 2 series is they were a big deal, because
Sure.
people packed that stadium. And
Right.
they were, again, neither season had the happy ending.
Right.
Both years turned out to be good years, and they were definitely worth remembering.
Yeah, and both seasons were among that cluster of seasons leading up to the 83 World Championship, where the Orioles were almost there in 79. 1980, 100 games. 81, you have the split season, the strike year. The Orioles were one of the best teams that year.
Right.
But in the format in 81, they didn't qualify for the postseason.
Right.
82, we talked about that at the beginning of the podcast, finishing one game out. And 83, they put it all together.
That's right. And they were just kept knocking on the door.
Right.
And, in 81, they had a great pennant race going with the Yankees in the first half of that season.
Yep.
And then it just nothing ever gelled in the second half. So, which is kind of, you could say that about the whole season, really, in baseball. Well, I know we've gone a bit longer than we did in other episodes, but I hope you find that the topics were worth it. And I hope you sense the excitement that Robin and I both had being a part of those series, rooting passionately for them. In 1980, I was listening to my radio in suburban DC, trying to get a good signal at night. It was worth it. You got any
Yeah.
last thoughts you want to add, Rob?
Yeah, we went into a lot of detail about these two series, but again, two of the most meaningful historical uh, series the Orioles ever played in the history of Memorial Stadium.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there haven't been a whole lot in the history of Camden Yards yet. Let's hope there are some down the road. But
Right. We're still
anyway,
waiting, folks.
hey, come on, come on. So, okay, well, I think that will wrap us up here. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Statman and Robin podcast. If you have any questions, ideas, or feedback, we've shared any memories that really meant something to you, please let us know. You can email us at statmanandrobin@gmail.com. And remember, it's good to look back as long as you live forward. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.